JD, welcome back. It's been a long week.
Sup? Happy Friday. Yeah, it's been an interesting week. American Airlines pilots decided to go on strike, and that made my life a lot less fun. But it's all good. Made it home eventually from LA, and before that from Consensus.
I wonder how many crypto bros are stranded in airports. Were there like Bitcoin meetups just suddenly?
So no, what happened? Yeah, right. No, so what happened is we were in LA, and at the same time, the conference that I was at called Medici. There's another one called Milken, which is a hell of a lot bigger. It's probably the largest global financial conference that there is, and it's like this huge ordeal. Like they commandeer a whole bunch of Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, like locations and all this other crap. Anyways, so getting out of LAX was an absolute nightmare. And then you have that combined with the pilot strike of American Airlines and all of these people all the same day trying to leave. It was just it was a disaster. But anyways, it's all good. We're here. So right now I say, I love you, American Airlines, but since it's FU Friday, F you, American Airlines, because you made my life a little less fun. Okay, Kiara, today's FU Friday. I'm excited.
Friday. We have episode 55 of Go FUD Yourself. And it's been a really exciting week because you weren't here. So we had like in-depth conversations. Leah and I talked yesterday for like 45 minutes about anonymity in blockchain, about all kinds of things. Andy and I on Wednesday talked about blockchain mining. Ben and I talked about banks and blockchain. And so there's a lot of things from all of that I can say F you to, but conveniently, the only very few news articles that came out for this morning are all kind of related to what we talked about in depth throughout the week. So if something seems out of place, you got to do your homework. But today we're going to talk about Coinbase and the SEC because JD's back and they did this just for him. And then we talked about this a little bit with Leah yesterday, but the standards hadn't actually come out yet. So we'll talk about some KYC expectations from the White House. And then we'll talk a little bit about institutional trading. And then we're going to talk about LeBron. Instead of having like a bad FU Friday, we're going to be like, F you, LeBron. You ready?
King James! All right, I'm ready. Let's do it. All right, welcome back. Okay, so just a quick update.
Yeah, what are you wearing?
I've got a cool Moon Sama public pressure and kilt shirt, but it's got a cool graphic.
Avatar on their game or something?
It looks just like me, I think, right?
Yeah.
If I had long hair, was a female, and looked entirely different than I do. But cool merch. I like it. It's kind of cool, the graphics. I don't know. Anyways, definitely reloaded on a little bit of merch, but ended up not walking around the conference much at all. So I have to load up at BTC Miami next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's coming up.
Coming up quick. So yeah, super exciting. Anyways, okay, where do you want to start?
We're going to start with Coinbase and SEC. So this was actually out of the news all week, much to my chagrin, but now we're back. And the US court has actually ordered the SEC to respond to Coinbase allegations within 10 days. So last week, we talked about this quite a bit, where Coinbase in 2022 released a petition asking for clearer regulation. The SEC said, it is clear. That's not a real response. So Coinbase is trying to take them to court about it. And they're winning. They're going to take them to court about it, it looks like. My main question about this, as someone who is not totally, an expert in American politics, is like, when you sue the SEC, what do you get out of it?
So, some sort of response. Generally, you don't sue the SEC for damages, at least as far as I know. Yeah. Often it's preemptive because you think the SEC is going to sue you, which is obviously the case with the Wells notice. That's essentially the SEC saying, hey, we're investigating you. Haha. So now they essentially countersued, more or less, not direct countersuit, but they're saying, hey, we've asked for guidance years ago. You're not providing said guidance. How are we supposed to make determinations on what we do not believe, and neither does the rest of the industry, that the classification as SEC jurisdiction is clear. It's not clear currently because it is apples and oranges currently. So until there's some sort of directive that says, doesn't matter, it's all securities, or doesn't matter, it's all commodities, or here's a framework for identifying whether it's a commodity or a security, it's very, very, very difficult to assess things operated by smart contracts in the same vein as things operated by discretionary private businesses, right? Now, an argument could be made that smart contracts are upgradable and you can make changes to many of them and you still set the parameters in the beginning, but many smart contracts are non-upgradable. And so you cannot change them after they're live and existing. And so anyways, but yeah, so that was a good question. Like, I don't know what they're looking for in response other than clarity.
Well, I just didn't think that you'd get damages, right? And if you do sue for damages,
I don't believe so.
It's via the government that we pay for. So I don't know. It just wasn't that clear to me. But what the other thing that's interesting here is Coinbase, as part of this, the SEC is now required to provide legal grounds for why they haven't responded. And my next kind of query is like, what happens if they don't do that? Like, do you fine internal government agencies? Is that when someone like Gensler gets under the chopping block? Like, what are the actual outcomes that could occur here other than them just providing legal grounds for why they haven't responded?
Yeah. So side note to all of this, I really hope Gensler gets elected to the Senate. There's speculation that he might run for the Senate, which would require him most likely to step down as SEC commissioner. He had aspirations of Treasury. That clearly is not going to be the case, it seems now. So hopefully Gensler goes elsewhere and we can start fresh with a new commissioner, but a new chair. But all of that being said, I think what they're hoping for and what they're probably going to get is, as a result, I don't think they're going to get damages. If they lose the suit, it's just going to force the SEC's hand. Like, I mean, now in America, the judiciary, and in most countries, not all, but most, the judiciary is a separate branch, right? It's not supposed to be political. It's supposed to be unbiased. It has no allegiance to the government, really. It's supposed to not, and no allegiance to anybody. It's supposed to be a neutral party. So if the government does something wrong, it'll rule against the government, so be it. Yeah, and we've seen this quite a bit. Like, we've seen the Supreme Court even overturn, government actions, stop government actions. Not necessarily. I mean, Biden has executed a few executive orders that were most likely unconstitutional and have been stopped, not penalized, right? Most other people, if you do something that's against the Constitution, you can be criminally penalized. But generally, that's not quite how it works with federal government. Anyways, I think this is good. This is very good, because whatever their response is to this document, and the argument is pretty straightforward. Hey, we asked for guidance. We waited patiently. We've done everything we can to try to adhere to whatever rules we know are clear. You didn't give us guidance, but you gave us a Wells notice saying that we're, effectively doing something inappropriate. What? Like, how can you expect us to come into compliance if you're not telling us what we need to do? And this whole, it's securities. Securities laws are clear. No, they're not. They're not clear for these types of assets because they're not the same. If they want all tokens to be securities, there's a path to that. But there has to be a change in the rules in how things are addressed if they are considered securities, because we can't do the same things that these discretionary institutions have the opportunity to do. And so anyways, this is great. I'm excited to see what their response is. 10 days is quick. I don't think we're going to like their response, to be honest. And it could cause some chaos. I was lucky enough to have to attend a fundraising dinner with Patrick McHenry, which is the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. There was like 15 of us in the room, which was really cool. So we got to have a pretty detailed, in-depth conversation about the bill they're working on in committee. I don't want to talk a whole lot about it on here because I'm not sure if it was somewhat of a confidential conversation. But by the sounds of it, the path that we're going down is going to be a fairly regulated one. So as a space in the US, we're going to have to prepare for some change.
I mean, that's not a surprise though, right?
Well, no, it's not. I mean, everybody's sitting here saying, let's just hope that they ignore us forever. They determine that they can't regulate us, but that's never going to happen. So we are going to be, for all intents and purposes, at least my interpretation is, we're going to be either a commodity or a security, period. All tokens in the US are going to be commodities or securities, period, end of story. And the determination of which one you are is what they're working on. How you identify which one you are. And for a whole
same topic,
yeah,
is that there are new standards that could have implications for crypto about KYC, anti-money laundering, so on and so forth. So they've identified 8 emerging technologies. Hilariously, I couldn't find the actual 8 emerging technologies list, but obviously blockchain is one of them. And they're saying digital ID is a second one. But if you are familiar with digital ID, you know that it will probably also end up being distributed ledger. So we see that commodity will tie you to those securities and commodities.
You kind of got rugged a little bit there. What did you say? Oh, that look on your face right now, you're frozen, is awesome. Damn, I tried to get a screenshot, but it unfroze too fast. Okay, so I have no idea what you just asked, but something about they're picking on blockchain. I mean, this is not a surprise. Like, the fact that we've been able to operate without mandatory KYC AML, I mean, it is, in my opinion, kind of crazy. Like, I don't love it, because it, again, is going to be a philosophical challenge for a lot of people that, you know, joined the space early on because of its quasi, you know, pseudo anonymity. I know you talked a lot about that, sounds like yesterday. But I mean, then it's going to be on us to somehow assess that information, but not hold that information, if that makes sense. So one of the biggest challenges, and this is something we're thinking a lot about, is how can we have access to, how can we have confidence in KYC and AML of the participants in whatever platforms we have without actually holding said identity data? Because that's going to be a huge area of exploit, potentially, is data on all these people. The other concern that a lot of people have is different than your bank account. If you have my wallet address and somewhere my wallet address is connected to my name, you can see literally everything I do as a protocol, as another participant in the ecosystem. So we have to find ways to still embed privacy, and there's many ways to do this. We're not going to get into it today, but there's many ways to do this where you can embed privacy but still have verifiable KYC AML information if it's required. And so I think that's a great area of opportunity. There's a lot of, you know, platforms and protocols that are working on DID, decentralized ID, and how that works. I'm pretty excited about that, but this is something that I think we're all just going to have to figure out. Like, we're going to KYC. If you want US people to use your protocol, if you're a US person, you're going to have to KYC, period.
We had some talks about this yesterday too, about how some of this was really anti-mixer. There were quite a few politicians who came out and directly said, we urge you to find a way to operate without using mixers because we will make them illegal, essentially. They didn't say it quite as succinct as that, but that is the statement. We already know that with what happened with Tornado Cash and what have you, but it is a big deal to some to have KYC and have no mixer. And like you say, have somebody be able to actually track all of your money movement, right? Publicly,
right.
In this very public kind of space. Obviously, there are always records. Things are not as anonymous as we think that they are, but it is an interesting concept here. But the other thing I thought was cool was that they are doing this in tandem, right? So we're looking at different ways that, are we going to be securities? Are we going to be commodities? How is that framework going to work? And at the same time, they're developing the framework for how they will tie your identity to that.
Yeah. So regardless of whether we're securities or commodities, in my opinion, KYC is going to be absolutely required if you're serving any US persons. So commodity, like, the reporting is different, and what your requirements are, whether you're a security or a commodity, are different as a platform, as a business. But the user, for all intents and purposes, will see the same experience, that they will have to KYC AML regardless. And that'll just be something that protocols need to figure out how to manage. And so,
do you think there will be pushback? Do you think protocols will push back?
Honestly, I don't think it's possible. Like I think it's if they put these rules in place, anybody that like at some point you will become an outlier by not adhering to them, and you will make yourself somewhat a target. Will some people try to do it like completely anonymously and create these completely anonymous keys burned protocols that can never do KYC and the government can't stop? But I think there's probably a possibility of that happening. I think it'll be kind of it'll be pursued as a bit of a public good. Like no one can make money off it, essentially, because there's other ways. Like even people that vote on the governance, if they can figure out who those people are, which they can, generally speaking, unless everybody that participates in governance is like an expert at identity security and making sure that you're anonymous. Anyways, I think it'll be very difficult. Now,
okay. Did you
wait,
see?
wait. Time out. I have one more thought before you move on. In terms of mixers, there are ways for mixers to actually be okay. So if a mixer KYCs, what a mixer does then is it cuts the paper trail of all of my transactions to the public. But if the mixer KYCs, if there's ever a problem, they can still figure out who I am and where the assets came from. And so a lot of the argument is a lot of people are using Tornado Cash just to obscure their activities, not necessarily to avoid. This is the argument they're making. I think it's a baloney argument, because if you weren't worried about malicious activity, then why would you care about KYC? Just put it through a centralized exchange and bring it back out. It's pretty simple to do. As long as it's not the exact same value, there's ways to do that. So anyways, I think there is a path still where mixers exist. They just will be regulated. I don't think they're all going to be completely illegal. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
You did, and my point is not relevant to mixers at all. It was relevant to protocol pushback, which is, Did you see what Pornhub did with Utah?
Yeah, so they just said, you know what?
I was looking for KYC stuff and KYC elements in the news, and our protocol's pushing back. And the answer is, I know that it's not exactly crypto, but Pornhub is in Utah, based on some new requirement, is required for people to show their ID every time they log on so they can access the 18A content. And Pornhub has decided to just not serve Utah because it is not a good porn experience to have to show your ID every time. I can understand why. But this is one of the ideas, I think, when we look at a company that's international, a company that people are going to use anyways, people are going to find workarounds for it, and there will be pushback against some elements of KYC depending on how deep it goes, right?
So I have a proposal for Pornhub. I absolutely will build a DID structure for them. I know exactly how to do it, exactly how they can do it, so that it's a one-time KYC, but that KYC is married to that person, and only that person with access to that KYC record is able to participate, but they only have to do it once. And I think, this is kind of an interesting, like, let's see if we can get enough public outrage, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're hoping that all of the over 18 people that are avid users of Pornhub in Utah, which I have to believe there's not that many, but who knows?
There's lots of celibate people in Utah. They're Mormons, right?
Maybe that's like maybe that's a big thing, but it's also like super against all their principles, I think. So I don't know. Anyways, point is, I think they're just trying to make a statement by saying, well, and then of course the media is running with this, like the conservative media, which normally I'm a fan of, is running with this in like a ridiculous way. Oh, well, just because they can't show porn to kids, they're just not going to show porn at all. No, that's not really what they're getting at. What they're getting at is the bar has been set too high, in their opinion, that somebody has to KYC every time they come onto the platform. I agree, though, that there should be some version of, like, I don't want my kids looking at Pornhub. Like, I mean, it's probably pretty explicit and graphic. Like, I don't think kids should be looking at that shit. So anyway,
I assume that if it's porn, that probably they're supposed to be, remember when we used to have Blockbusters and they were in the dark room at the back?
Yeah.
Right, there was some element of policing.
And they'd come and kick you out. I mean, you can't walk into an adult XXX store without having to show ID. Like, it's kind of the same idea, in my opinion. So I'd love, maybe we can tag Pornhub. I'd love to have a discussion. I'd love to have a discussion with Pornhub because it's actually a fairly simple, incredibly cost-effective way to do this. There's a solution already out of the box that would actually do this already. So anyways.
I'll let them know that we can build it for them.
Let Pornhub know that we can build it.
About KYC, that'd be cool.
That would be really cool. All right, what else?
All right, the next one is about institutional trading. So Open Trade has raised 1.5 million for building crypto structured financial products. I don't actually care that much about the raise, to be honest, but I did think that the products they're offering are fascinating, like liquidity pools for US Treasury bills.
Yeah, so this is interesting. They actually have Open Finance has really good liquidity already on these Open Trade. Yeah, but it used to be called Open Finance, I think, or at least that's what most of it. I think it's the same platform. Might be a new one. That would be weird if they're both called Open. But anyways, nonetheless, I think this is like the first step to bringing US T-bills on chain. I think it's one of the first steps in bringing meaningful scale to real world assets on chain. When we talk about real world assets, a lot of people think like real estate, cars, business interests, like private equity, some of these other things. But it's actually, in many ways, bringing real world assets on chain could be a lot less illiquid. So it could be registered securities, it could be bonds, which are also registered securities, it could be other commodities that we just bring on chain and allow to be transacted. One of the questions that were asked a lot and that came up a lot at Medici, which is an institutional leaning conference, was, but like, what value proposition is there to bringing these on chain? And I think, there's the obvious 7 days a week, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day type thing. Yeah, cool. The near instant settlement is also important. But there is some bureaucracy that has to happen in the middle. And that's what the space is also trying to figure out. If we're bringing T-bills on chain, I mean, you're not going to get the Fed to actually issue T-bills on chain. They're going to be T-bills that were issued in the real world that they're then going to have to custody somewhere and issue a representative asset on chain. It's definitely doable. I think there's a path towards it. I think it's amazing, to be honest. The fact that they've raised, $1.5 million is probably enough to get them some of their licenses that they require, I'm assuming. But I mean, the fact that Circle's invested, Kronos is invested, Polygon, Kyber, like these are outlier ventures, of course. These are like fairly prominent names that have a vested interest in this, either sorting itself out or not. Beyond just this protocol, I think this is partially an investment in creating a precedent, which I think is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Kara, last one is the fun one. LeBron is wearing artifact sneakers.
Yeah.
I love this. I figured you'd love this because CloneX, I know you love CloneX and Artifact. And I don't know, it's just cool. It's cool to see an NFT artifact out in real life that people take note of, right?
Yeah.
No, don't you dare FUD this one.
I'm going to FUD the shit out of this. First of all, I'm not a huge LeBron fan because I feel like LeBron generally sticks his neck where it doesn't belong, in my opinion. He's huge on the social wars stuff and all this other nonsense where you're a professional basketball player, not an expert in any of this other shit. So just focus on what you're good at, maybe. Now, to his defense, he's a great philanthropist. He's helped a hell of a lot of people. He does a lot of good for society also. So shouldn't overshadow that, but it's just like, you do so much good, just stay out of the other stuff. Anyways.
A lot of people believe that it's their virtue to use the platform that they have, right? On both sides, both liberal and conservative sides. And sure, we see that a lot in athletes and what have you. But yeah, his shoes aren't politicized.
No, his shoes aren't politicized. I have to wonder if he's being compensated for this or if he's just doing it.
So because he does have a Nike sponsorship contract.
Exactly. So I'm curious where that incentive actually shakes out. And the reason I say that is because I'm a huge CloneX fan. I love what they're doing. I think they're definitely pioneering, partnering with major international brands. They're doing something really cool. Love it. Love the relationship with Nike. Obviously, Artifact is just a great group. I feel like Trump. Anyways, I love what they're doing. I'm concerned that there might be issues with him representing a financial investment or some nonsense, like implying that. So he's just going to have to be careful that he doesn't get sued like every other celebrity that's endorsed.
I often wonder with these types of things, like where he is contracted by Nike, maybe he bought these of his own accord. Maybe it's part of his contract that he had to wear these ones, whatever. But like, I imagine that he just gets 100 Nike sneakers, and he's got to wear all of them in the year or something in public, right? There's going to be some sort of clause about how much he has to wear them, what they look like, what outfits they go with, what events he wears them to. That's all involved in your major sponsorship contract, right? And so I imagine that he just like picks some.
You got rugged. Okay, I've muted Kiara because she sounds like a robot. But yeah, I think there's probably some of that here, and I haven't seen or heard anything that suggests that LeBron is out there actively representing CloneX and Artifact. I would hope it stays that way. I mean, endorsements have been this way since pro sports have been a big thing, right? Like they just get people to wear their stuff. They don't say anything about it. They just wear their stuff and represent it. And that's it. They're not talking about the financial investment. They're not talking about number go up. None of that shit. And so as long as LeBron stays head above water, this is huge. This is huge for, I think, legitimizing some of these types of.
But my point is, what if he has no idea and he starts getting like rushed by NFT kids?
I'm sure he knows. I mean, he
knows now because they gave him his own clone. He got his own cool CloneX. But before that, what if he just was like, "These are the shoes I'm going to wear today," and then it becomes a news story,
Yeah, it's kind of like when all the celebrities got Bored Apes.
Yeah,
and they're representing them on their talk shows and all this other nonsense. Anyways, I think it's a net good for the space. I just hope he doesn't opine on this too much because again, people will trust him because of his celebrity factor, but I mean, he has no idea what that's not his core competency, obviously. So anyways, I'm a little fuddy on that, mainly because I'm not a huge LeBron fan, but I think net for the space, it's good.
Okay. It's almost time to be gone. But you haven't really said FU to anyone in particular. Do you have any crypto FUs to end the week?
Well, I'm going to double down on my FU American Airlines. I'm going to say that the courts gave an FU to the SEC on behalf of Coinbase. Now, I also was at a talk with Brian Armstrong on Monday. So I think his conviction and commitment to pioneering this fight, I think is worth recognizing. So I also still, as always, true to form, FU, SEC, figure it the fuck out. Help us, help you, help us. Like,
who are we going to say FU to when the SEC releases statements? You have to find a new enemy, JD.
I don't know. Depends what those statements say. But no, I think it's just generally an FU. Like, let's just figure this out. Like, it's getting old.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Go FUD yourself, JD.
I have FUDed myself all morning. I'm going to continue doing it. But yeah, we'll see. We'll be here every day, Monday to Friday. Well, that's not a public holiday. 12:30 p.m. Eastern, same place. Like, share, subscribe. Send us questions, comments.
You didn't say it back. Are you mad at me?
F you, Kiara. Go FUD yourself. I mean,